Hey folks, it's Brian Bledsoe again, meteorologist and climatologist for Ag Risk Advisors, working with Aaron Tattersall here, talking about the long-range forecast for what is the rest of 2020 and as we head into 2021. A lot riding on stuff like this, especially with what I've been detailing with you over the past couple of videos with the La Nina episode that was taking hold. So I'm going to update you on that and give you some model updates too on kind of where we're going over the next several months. So let's go to the first slide, and it shows you where we've been over the past 60 days. Precipitation percent of normal, at least in inches. And all you need to know about this graphic is the browns and the reds, drier than average, where you're seeing the blues and the greens, wetter than average. And you can see a large part of the central U.S. and back over the western U.S. have been largely drier than average to much drier than average over the past couple of months or so. And with the monsoon season having failed again, second consecutive year over the southwest, it's no wonder why those conditions are so dire down there in terms of drought. Let's go to the next slide and show you over the next 30 days. This is the forecast. Okay, so brown areas, again, likely drier than average over the next 30 days. The greens and the blues, though, this is where we're likely to see wetter than average conditions, and this is pretty typical for a La Nina episode to see the storm track become more energetic up here in the Pacific Northwest and on up into the west coast of British Columbia. At least at that point, though, that's where the main influence of moisture will be relegated, and then eventually it'll probably spread across the northern Rockies, but that'll probably take a little bit longer. So wetter than average Pacific Northwest, far northern California maybe as well, but the farther east you go, probably still dry for at least a little bit longer. Let's go to the next slide. This is the sea surface temperature anomaly map I grabbed just a couple of days ago. Again, there's the La Nina right there going full bore in the blues and the greens. The orange and the reds here, water temperatures that are warmer than average. And I think as the Pacific jet stream gets more energetic and brings more frequent storms across the North Pacific, a lot of this is probably going to start to cool down a little bit. And that's significant because that allows the La Nina influence to grab and take hold even more in a more traditional role across the United States. As you'll see here in just a little bit in some of the model graphics, it's very classical in terms of what you would expect with a La Nina. But again, La Nina probably not going to change a whole lot on the weaker side. Probably, if nothing else, it's going to get a little bit stronger. Let's go to the next graphic and show you the sea surface temperature animation over the past several weeks. And you can see here back in July, initially it wasn't that big of a deal. And then look at the blues extend here off the west coast of South America out in the central Pacific. That's the La Nina developing and getting stronger in time. That's at the surface. If we look beneath the surface with this next graphic, you could see what I'm talking about there. All of this blue is water temperatures that are colder than average, and look at the depth that it's at, almost down to 200 meters here, and very robust here off the west coast of South America. Over here on the right side of the graph, this would be the west coast of South America. Over here on the left side of the graphic, that would be off the northeast coast of Australia, and again, from 0 down to 450 meters across that area. So you can see the Pacific is warmer than average in the far west and definitely cooler than average across the central and the east. And that, my friends, is certainly the look of a La Nina episode that is firmly developed. Let's go to the next slide and show you what the model forecasts look like over the next several months. Again, the letters at the bottom start over on the far left, June, July, August. That's what JJA means. Over here on the far right, MJJ, May, June, July. And where you're seeing these lines that are below the zero line right there, that's all those computer models indicating the likelihood of La Nina continuing over a period of time and probably not getting back up toward neutral territory until sometime during the spring. So I feel pretty confident this is La Nina is going to last through the rest of fall, probably winter, and not go away until sometime during the spring. So bottom line, what you see is what you get. It's going to be here for a little while. Let's go to the next graphic. Which starts off with the model forecast, the NNME model, North America Multi-Model Ensemble. You've seen this before, and where the greens and the blues are, that's where it's wetter than average. Where the yellows, oranges, and reds are, that's where it's drier than average. And I'll tell you what, this is for November, and you can see the stout dry signal down here across the southern tier of the country. That is classical in terms of how a La Nina impacts the southern tier of the United States. And again, the northern Rockies, Pacific Northwest, probably wetter than average during that time. If we go to December, on the next graphic, you can see that that situation doesn't change a whole lot. A little bit better moisture spreads across the northern Rockies, but from California, Arizona, New Mexico, Texas, right down along the Gulf Coast, that dry signal is still fairly robust. We may get a little bit of a break here. Places like Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, as the storm track gets a little more energetic, especially in the mountains, but I'm not that enthusiastic at all about bringing a lot of moisture east of the mountains here in the western high plains, and certainly the southern plains look a lot drier than average. Let's go to January. Same trend. California, for the most part, gets shut off as far as the dry signal goes. Far northern California, you see there in the white, Pacific Northwest, northern Rockies, probably the best chance of seeing wetter than average conditions, minus areas up here in the Corn Belt, Great Lakes, and into the Northeast. But not a whole lot of change from those previous 2 months. Let's go to February. Same story. Large dry signal out here. California and across the Southwest, including Southwest Colorado, New Mexico, and Texas. Wetter than average in those same areas that were wetter than average before. You see, when you get this firmly developed La Nina in place, the weather pattern doesn't change a whole lot, at least the way the computer model sees it here, folks. So areas that have been wet or will get wet will probably stay that way. Areas that have been dry will continue to likely get drier. That's through February. Let's go to March, which is so important here across the southern Rockies to get late season snowpack. I'm not that excited about that. And you can see the dry signal still fairly robust right there in the same areas and also down along the Gulf Coast. So even through March, the situation looks pretty similar. Let's go to April. Not a whole lot of change there. Dryness across the west. Central Rockies, western high plains, parts of the southern plains and the Gulf Coast. Average to wetter than average conditions continue over the northern tier. One more month will go into May, and that situation remains pretty much the same story. Let's go to the next graphic and you can see that. Pretty stout dry signal here extending from the southern Rockies down into the southern plains once again. That's what dryness and drought will do though too, folks. You get it going, it gets the positive feedback going, it becomes very hard to erase, and at least the presence of a weak La Nina looks still fairly viable, at least through the early part of spring before we start to see that potentially go away. We'll have to wait and see how that pans out. But you see the dry stay dry and get drier, the wet or going to get wet and wetter through the same pattern. Let's go to the next graphic. This will be for the European model, and this is for October, the rest of the month as I showed you. And you can see the dry stay dry and get even drier. The Pacific Northwest, Northern California, a little bit better moisture right there. Let's go to November. And you can see the Pacific Northwest, far northern California, a little bit of hope here, maybe even for central California. And in November, at least as far as the Euro model is concerned, it has a little bit better outlook for those locations. But again, the farther east you get, those dry conditions hold true. Places like Arizona, New Mexico, Texas starting to dry out again, eastern Colorado. Let's go into December. And that's where the model really starts to dry things out here. The far northern part of California, wetter than average, northward through Oregon and Washington, across Idaho, parts of Montana, but most of California, Nevada, Utah, Arizona, even into Colorado and parts of the Central Plains, drier than average. You see the Gulf Coast kind of in the same boat. If we go to January, same story. Excuse me. The southern tier of California dry, far north and on up in the Pacific Northwest stays wet. Southern Rockies are staying dry down through the southern plains. Corn Belt, upper Midwest doing okay. That's fairly typical for the this time of year with a La Nina. If we go to February, same story. Boy, it didn't change a whole lot at all, did it? Dry, eastern Colorado, New Mexico, Arizona, most of Texas, Southern California, wetter than average conditions here. Once you get east of I-35, and during a La Nina episode, I-35, a very solid definitive line, if you will, between the drought to the west and the weather than average conditions to the east. And you can see really that's on a line from Wichita to Oak City to Dallas and points east get the better moisture. Areas west and southwest of that line, not so much. Let's go to March, which again is a critical month here. Western High Plains, Southern Rockies looks average to drier than average during that time. Pacific Northwest, Northern Rockies, also out here into the upper Midwest and the Mississippi, Missouri Valley doing okay. And I believe we have April to look at again, where that dry signal is still very prevalent for some of those areas that are remaining dry. Now again, I know this is a ways out, but you could see that both models are mostly on the same page with how this pattern will continue to evolve over the next several months as far as who's going to stay dry and who is more likely to see the better moisture. So let's go into our regional breakdown here and show you at least the Northern Rockies, Pacific Northwest. Drought currently is an issue for many of those areas. You don't need me to tell you that. But the storm track should get increasingly active in this region, especially November, December, and drought will likely become quite a bit less over time. And you saw the reason why, as both models were lighting up the Pacific Northwest with increasing moisture over the next several months or so. Let's go to the next region, which is California, Nevada. Drought continues to expand for a large part of this. Again, it's going to continue to intensify. The summer and fall fire season have obviously been brutal for many areas. Drought will likely lessen in time for the far northern areas. So again, up here, far northern California, Nevada, but most of these regions will likely continue to see the drought develop or intensify further over the next several months if this pattern holds, which it looks like it's going to. Let's go to the next map. This is for the Four Corners area where the drought has been crippling in many places. Areas north of I-70 will have the best shot to see the drought lessen. So again, north of I-70, that's the far northern side of Colorado up into Wyoming. Northern Utah probably has the best shot to see the drought lessen and possibly disappear over time, although that will take a little bit. But areas south of I-70 will likely struggle with the continuing and intensifying drought over the next several months. So the north will probably get better, especially up into Wyoming, but the farther south you go, not so much. Next map. Southern Plains, not much to talk about here, east of I-35 across eastern Oklahoma, East Texas, but the drought will continue to develop and expand here from west to east in time, especially the farther south you go down here across central and southern Texas, where drought will likely get a pretty good foothold in time. At least historically speaking, that's been the case. And also with the way the models are stacking up, I think that that's going to be the case. Let's go to the next slide. Plains, Midwest, regional, and I anticipate a lot of the drought in the central and northern plains to gradually go away as we see the storm track getting increasingly active. The storm track likely favoring areas, especially north of I-80 in these regions. Models and analogs continue to support this theory. And again, the drought isn't terrible up in these locations. It wouldn't take much to erase it, a couple of big storms, but the farther south and west you go, that's where we're going to continue to likely struggle over the next several months. Next slide basically just kind of wraps things up here with Ag Risk Advisors. And again, that's my contact information right there. If you have questions, please feel free to email or reach out to Aaron. You can hit me up on Twitter as well. And as I always tell you, if you need weather for your biz, just simply ask me for a quote and we'll get things started for you. But I hope you get a better understanding over the past 3 videos of what we've been talking about, and you see the progression of something that I've been talking about now since back in late winter and spring that was going to grab on, latch on, and really have a significant impact for many areas of the country, especially those that are going to be dealing with drought. Thanks for having me today, folks. Thanks for watching, and I'll be checking back with you soon.